granniopteryx, she knows the truth, she's linking every link.
Hello. I can actually scarcely believe this. M&S chief, Marks and Spencer's, Stuart Mackin, says retailer already makes a loss on bread and bananas and urges ministers to cut taxes instead because Rachel Reeves, our genius of an economist, is proposing that the supermarkets price cap or submit to a price cap on certain foods. The chief executive of Marks and Spencer's has described Rachel Reeves' plan for supermarket price caps as completely preposterous. And the government should not be trying to run business after it emerged that the Chancellor was asking supermarkets to freeze the price of essential products such as milk and eggs in exchange for waivers on some red tape. So that's like a Ponzi scheme. No, a protection racket, isn't it? It's what the government are saying, well, we're punishing you with all these rising prices and extra taxes and national insurance and fuel duty and you name it. But if you cap the price of eggs, I suppose, milk, bread, some basic staples like that, then you're going to get, some sort of waiver on all of these extras. It's just a little more red tape, isn't it? It was Lao Tzu who said something about trying to govern is like trying to hold water in your hand. It's going to leak out places here and there. Now, as it so happens, I was somewhat shaken out of my basically socialistic ideas by reading Thomas Sowell. And he's got a book out called Basic Economics, which I think Rachel Reeves might benefit from reading, because her stint at the Bank of England, although she said she was an economist, turned out she was in customer service or something. I don't know. I can't be sure about that. My knowledge about Rachel Reeves' history in academia of any sort is strictly limited, but then so is hers. Look, why shouldn't you, let's take eggs. Why shouldn't you cap the price of eggs? The chickens are going to lay the eggs anyway. Well, the problem is it'll lead to shortages. It won't solve affordability. You know, Basic Economics said that, what did he say? Price controls suppress the mechanisms that allow resources to be allocated efficiently. You know, I keep saying, if you've been watching my channel for a while, that socialists don't learn from history. I keep saying that, and it shouldn't be something I have to keep saying, but every time I want to talk about something, it seems that the government are making the same blasted stupid mistakes they always made they just don't learn. Just about everyone's tried price caps and they've never worked. For instance, Sowell mentioned ancient Rome, the French Revolution, and even the 1970s when Nixon apparently tried a price cap on meat and it ended up causing a beef shortage. He also talked about petrol. He said that when there was the 1970s gas crisis, you know, supplies went, people discovered that a lot of the filling stations were running dry, and there was a lot of talk about the idea that the companies were taking advantage of the situation by hoarding petrol, gas, and for that reason there was this shortage. And what nobody twigged to at the time was that people were hoarding petrol. What was happening was they knew there was a problem of supply, so they went to the garages, the filling stations more often. If they saw they were down, like to about 3/4, which is a sort of situation where you wouldn't think of going to the filling station and refilling your car. But if you think there's going to be a problem buying petrol a week away, so even if you're down to 3/4, you're going to fill your car up. So the country America was driving around on tanks of unnecessary hoarded petrol. That sort of thing happens when there are those sorts of controls. Anyway, supermarkets happen to operate on a very small profit margin. Everyone says that. I have to believe them, because even economists are saying that. And the supermarkets get over this problem of only earning pennies on items by selling in bulk. So they get lots of pennies. But the first thing that happens when you've got caps is that the more price intensive properties get ditched. In the case of the UK, that will be outlets in more remote towns and villages, because not only is the turnover slower and lower, but actually getting the stuff to those shops costs more. And that's not only because of the individual drivers' wages, but also the petrol, because there's higher prices on fuel now. Supermarkets, the farmers and the people who process the food and the distributors will also be having their profits cut even finer. And sometimes they'll actually be losing money on certain lines, like it said here that they're losing money, that Marks and Spencer's are losing money on bananas and bread. There aren't that many businesses who can keep themselves running on that, especially if more items get capped, because let's face it, once the government starts capping just one or two things, it won't matter, it's just one or two things, just bread and milk, think of the children. It'll go to everything else after a while. Bit by bit, more and more stuff is going to be price capped. So the result will be fewer goods for sale. In other words, as Sol said, scarcity. And of course, there's other things. These are long-term things like business development, less willingness to take risks. So I was talking about eggs before. What sort of risk do you have with eggs? Well, there's investments in barns and pastures and for free range, and less ideas of expanding, less willingness to try untried technology. For instance, I saw a nice thing on YouTube, and it was a big hen house that was almost the width of a field, but it moved. It was on a motor. It just kept moving. And so the chickens were being moved inside this moving hen house, and they were, pecking away at the grass and the bugs there and all the rest of it. And they were on fresh territory every 15 minutes or however long it took to move. So the field got fertilized by the droppings, and the hens got clean, fresh food from the ground, which while not being under risk from predators like foxes. But, that sort of thing costs money. And if you're already cut down almost to the bone on your profits, you're going to look at that and think, well, I'd like that, but I can't afford that. And as I said, there's going to be even less willingness to supply to shops that are off the beaten track, because it's more expensive to get the stuff there. Not only is the food costing more, but the actual transport's costing more. And so we'd probably have to, they'd almost certainly cut down on fuel costs, even in the more well-travelled areas, by reducing the numbers of deliveries. So we'd probably end up having to discovering that the eggs are turning up in your supermarket only on Thursdays, or whatever. Sowell lists quite a few cases where controls turned reasonably obtainable goods into major shortages. Another problem with price controls, of course, is quality. If a company can't make more than a couple of pence on an item, it's going to look for substitute ingredients that will give them 3 pence. Obviously, eggs won't change in that way, but the hens are certainly going to get a less quality food. If the farmers aren't getting much for each egg, then they'll cut costs on feed, and possibly even worse, they might consider changing their flocks if they're running a flock of I don't know what, but there are different types of chickens, some of which lay rather unusually coloured eggs, or different breeds of different types of eggs. And the farmers are going to look, when they're replenishing their flocks, for cheaper, higher yield hens. And so you're going to end up with all these side breeds, dying out. It cuts down the diversity of the flocks. Yeah, this government's always talking about diversity. And here the government is considering a step which will actually cut down diversity. And we all know the evils that attend the introduction of any sort of a monoculture, don't we? In the 19th century, the Irish had a potato monoculture. That went well, didn't it? Potato blight hit, need I say more? So with a price cap, we'll get cheaper, often lower grade ingredients. We'll get less of a product in the packets. That's another way. Do you remember, anyone remember how big Mars bars used to be? And there'll be less fresh stock in order to cut delivery costs. The end result will be less value. Sowell said, effectively, a price cap is a hidden price increase. Of course, this leads to hoarding, obviously not with eggs, but there are plenty of items that you can hoard. I told you about the petrol one. Because once this idea gets started, it won't be just eggs and milk. A government gets addicted to these easy solutions. And here we go. There's always the best solution, of course, will be ration books. Oh, you think I'm over-egging, to coin a phrase, over-egging the pudding here? No, I can just imagine this government in extremis introducing ration books, and they'll put it like this. Dishonest people are buying up cheap eggs and selling them on a black market. That's a terrible crime against society, and we have to stop it. Also, while we're at it, rich people will be buying more eggs because, after all, they're cheaper. And we've got to stop that happening as well. So we'll issue stamps so you can only buy 4 eggs a week, whatever you are, whoever you are. That's going to stop all the dishonesty and all the unfairness. So there. You think that's not going to happen? Well, you'd think that the idea of price caps wouldn't happen either, because we have books. We know where that leads. You know, it's a slippery slope. Of course, Sowell said that price caps don't solve the root problem. His analogy was that the price is like a thermometer. And if somebody has a fever, you don't bring his fever down by putting the thermometer under a cold tap. You see, what's happening here is the price of employing people is a huge problem now. They put national insurance up, and they've also made it far more difficult to sack an unsuitable employee. So those employees' rights have been expanded so far, like the renters' rights, for instance, that it's really dangerous to take on new workers now. And as I've said, the price of the basic stuff, fuel, or the wages of the drivers delivering the stuff, they all are cost more now. They have higher taxes one way or another. And so though the prices of goods in the supermarket, they might go up to cover this, and then the price cap is this putting the thermometer under a cold tap. The thermometer readings, that is the statistics, may look like the fever is lower, but it isn't. The illness is still there. Sowell's solution is to encourage production, not to cap prices, and to stop putting barriers in the way of suppliers, in the way of producers, in the way of processors. And that's what this fellow is saying. Do you think the government's going to listen to him? Not at all. They, like other socialists I keep talking about, they don't learn from history. Mr. Makin said the government should cut tax and relax regulation across the board. What he means is stop this nonsense of national insurance and employees' rights and even renting rights, because employees have to live somewhere. Just cut all that stuff. You know, I keep saying this. I think Liz Truss had the right idea. The only problem was she was unfortunate enough to come into power when the Bank of England was being run by Mark Carney. And, Mark Carney's busy making a mess of Canada right now. OK, what else? Oh, the Scottish National Party has drawn up similar proposals that would legally require large supermarkets to limit the cost of up to 50 essential food items. You see what I mean? It's not just eggs and milk and bread. It's 50, that's a whole lot of stuff. But you expect the Scottish National Party to come up with that sort of nonsense, don't you? Let's see. Lord Rose of Monudon, the former boss of Asda and Marks and Spencer, said, "I think the whole idea is stuff and nonsense and it will never fly. This smacks of state control, it's idiotic, it's dangerous, and it'll never work." That is no reason this government can ever think of to actually stop doing what they're doing. They have no appreciation of basic economics, and I suggest they start reading Thomas Sowell. He told the BBC we go back to the 70s, to Edward Heath, who was a Conservative, by the way, to Harold Wilson. So it's not just the Labour Party that thinks of these things. Fundamentally, they don't work. We have no better system than a free market economy. A free market economy does work. And that's it, a free market economy. And now we're on to the EU, because the Labour Party currently want to take us back to the EU as well, which is the same thing, controls. They're all into control. And you cannot control a country. You can't control it. The most you can do is make the situation easy for people to earn a living. And they're not doing that now. They're just chipping away. They think, well, OK, I'll sort this out, so that'll be all right. And then something else slips out the side. So, OK, we've got to sort that out. And then something else slips out the side. It's like whack-a-mole. That's what it's like. It's like whack-a-mole, this sort of thing. Well, we all know what happened to the Soviet Union. They ended up completely bankrupt. And it was because of this sort of attitude. I think I've said enough about that, except to say, Thomas Sowell, read it, Mrs. Reeves. Do you think she's going to listen to me? OK, till next time. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.